Yeah.
Picking up on the idea of extremists taking over a party and a great deal of our country, I think the really dangerous thing is that they're being funded by the wealthy elite, and they have the power to continue these extremist policies that are very dangerous and destructive to our democracy. So people need to start thinking about what does it take to have a real democracy and to start building at grassroots level, and that's the only way to get our country back, I think.
If you vote Republican, or you're intending to vote Republican this year, you might want to stop and take a look at what's become of the party over the last 30 or 40 years that you're intending to support. See, back in the 60s and early 70s, the Republican Party was largely a bunch of guys who, they kind of wanted to keep government reasonably small, and they wanted to get the taxes reasonably light, and they wanted to keep the economy humming along and keep those oil depletion allowances in place. And as long as they could do that, they were pretty happy. But the problem was that was all pretty boring. They couldn't quite, with platforms like that, attract enough of a base to actually capture the White House very often, or a House of Congress every now and then. So, in their wisdom, they decided they had to make their tent bigger, started attracting more groups, do things that were more sexy. And the first group that they managed to attract to into their tent was, of course, people that weren't very happy with civil rights laws and with integration laws and getting rid of Jim Crow laws. In other words, they began to attract elements of people at first who were didn't want to sit next to a black person at a lunch counter, didn't want one dating their daughter, and then eventually this expanded to people who are outright hardcore racists. If you're in either one of those groups right now, you claim you're not a racist, but you just don't necessarily want your daughter to date somebody of another race or ethnicity, then, or if you're a hardcore, then you probably vote Republican.
That was the Southern strategy.
That's the Southern strategy. It gets a little bigger. Okay. The next group that they played up to were people who were very serious about religion. Up to that time, as long as you didn't belong to some off-brand religion like Judaism, or you maybe went to church on a fairly regular basis, you were a viable national candidate on the Republican ticket. So the party began pandering to people of a more religious bent, particularly evangelicals. Now, the problem is that once those people got a taste of what real political power was like, they just elbowed most of the rest of the people out of the way and pretty much took over the party. Now you can't be a serious Republican candidate unless you not only are you a regular churchgoer, but you are very emphatic about proclaiming your religion, about declaring that religion is not only important, but it must be brought right into the halls of government and made an integral part of actually governing people. Then you also have that they brought in people who are very serious about gun laws, and particularly gun rights. Now, I personally do not believe there's any problem. In fact, I think it's a good idea that as long as you're not a felon and you're not crazy, you ought to be able to own a firearm or guns for sport. I think that's perfectly legitimate. However, I don't think that anybody needs to own an AK-47 or a whole lot of AK-47s or any kind of assault rifle. The folks that are in this group, the zealots in this group, will tell you that the reason they need an AK-47 is because they're afraid the government's going to come and take their guns. Well, I don't know if you've watched much television news lately, but even your local law enforcement now wears body armor, has automatic weapons, has armored vehicles and ordnance. If the government wants to come and get your guns, they're going to come and get your guns. And if you try to defend them with an AK-47, they're going to kill you. If you don't believe me, just check out what happened at Ruby Ridge, Waco, with the Symbionese Liberation Army. Those people are all dead. So I don't really think you need an AK-47, and I think it's much wiser not to have one. If you want to do something about the government coming for your guns, ballots, not bullets, is the answer. Civil disobedience, not violence, is the way to do it. Like I say, if you use an AK-47 to defend your guns, they're going to kill you. But I digress. We saw this week in Florida the results of what happens when you have a party that has pandered to the craziest elements of society, and when that party begins to get people elected and actually to enact laws. What we saw in Florida this week was a legalized murder. A 250-pound man shot and killed a 17-year-old kid who weighed 140 pounds and claimed self-defense. The man was released with not only without being seriously questioned or arrested, but he was sent home with his gun as well.
And the kid was unarmed.
No, the kid was armed with a can of iced tea and a bag of Skittles.
Oh, yes.
So what has happened in Florida is that you have had a law enacted where it is legal to shoot someone who is not only unarmed, but within no bounds of reasonable belief in any way capable of physically threatening you. So technically, if you believe that wasn't murder, I could technically go to Florida, shoot a 12-year-old girl in the presence of no witnesses, and claim that she attempted to attack me. And I stood my ground according to the law and defended myself. This is what happens when you have a big tent full of people with extremist ideas in your party, and you elect them and they enact laws. Thanks for listening, and hey, have a great day. It's beautiful here.
Are you ready? Okay. I'm Allison, and I have a brief announcement. And that is that Norm Stanford, who used to be chief of the Seattle Police, back when we had what's called the Battle in Seattle, the WGO thing. Anyway, he was chief of police then. He's kind of changed his mind after that experience, and he's speaking out against militarization of our police. And we get to hear him right here on San Juan Island. He's going to be at the Skagit Valley College in the community room Sunday. And, well, actually, I think if you come in at 3:30, you get the cookies. But I think he's speaking at 4. So you all come. We'll see you there.
Life is change. Growth is optional. Choose wisely.
My name is Terry Chester. I'm a survivor of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And I just want to say that I think people should open up their minds, turn off their TVs and their devices, even though we're using one right now, and look around a little bit. See what we're losing our rights. We're losing our freedom, and everybody's just sitting still for it, except for a small group. So thank you. I can say a lot more, but I'm not gonna.
Alamosa Bill had... I'll try that again. Hi. Hello. Sanchez.
Don't get just